Hallo und guten Morgen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is actually my Unashamed inspired salon, but this morning I'm gonna speak in English, and I invited my friend Alexandra from London. She's in the lockdown in London, and I'm really happy to have her on my Zoom to share my inspiration with you.
Exactly. And we just had a whole conversation about whether we should speak in German or in English. But then we remembered all our nice friends in everywhere in our FAMQ community. And so we wanted to send this to everybody. And so we are now talking in English and trying to be even natural and unashamed in English.
Totally, it was super funny. We already started and I just started speaking in German because this is super familiar to me. But then we realized, no, wait a minute, just go back. We need to speak in English because we just want to spread it with our friends around the world.
Exactly. And to your point, when you decided to call your podcast and your website or your claim Unverschämt weiblich or unashamedly feminine, I was very present to the fact that in German you say unverschämt, but you don't really have the same connotation when you say the English word. So I looked up the English word before I came into our conversation, and I have something for you which I looked up, which is from the Cambridge Dictionary.
Okay.
Unashamed means not ashamed, which means without hiding behavior or opinions that other people might consider unacceptable. And I thought this is so interesting because it tells you what it's all about. It's actually all about other people's opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is why I loved it so much when you said, you know, let's talk about where we can be unashamed, which means that where can we just don't care so much what other people are thinking, and what does that mean in our life?
Absolutely. And this was actually the moment as I received the word unverschämt, which is unashamed in English, because, you know, on one hand it's being sassy and super following your intuition, and then the other thing is what is holding us back is most of the time the fear not being not good enough, the fear of being ashamed what others saying. And so I thought I just want to bring those both things together, and this is to empower women or even everyone, to empower them to live their own truth. So yeah, and this is really nice that you just looked it up in the dictionary. And because, you know, we were thinking, and I'm trying to find the right word for in English, but first I thought, okay, it's important to have it in German for me and to understand what is the meaning for me, and then there will be the time where I can translate it in the right way into English.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And you know, I found another description which also I think is so interesting, which is if you describe someone's behavior or attitude as unashamed, you mean that they are open and honest about things that other people might find embarrassing or shocking.
Oh wow, yeah.
Which totally nails it. So I mean, it's you know, I had this whole sort of contemplation about what is right and what is wrong. And you know, our topic we love so much, you and I, which is how are we conditioned, you know, and how do we have to fit into a mold, and how do we have to adapt and accommodate and appease, and so yeah,
totally
big topic.
Yeah, big topic. And and the other, so this is one part, but the feminine part is the other part in it, and this is actually what connects us, and how I met you, because I this morning before I got here, or as I prepared myself, I was just reminding myself how we met each other. And it was so funny because it also leads back to being unashamed, or being in shame, being fearful. Because I actually booked a coaching or a training, a retreat in the UK in April 2017, I guess it was. And then on this page, I saw your picture and I thought, wow, I really want to know that woman. Who is she? She's actually living in Berlin. And so I Googled her. And yeah, actually, I felt not good enough to reach out to you before I went to the retreat. And I think these are the blockages, and this is what I want to overcome by myself, and also empower others to just really listen to this little intuition in our body, what is driving us and guiding us. So
I didn't even know that part of the story, but isn't it amazing that you thought you're not good enough and now you are one of my most important teachers? That's how life goes sometimes, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. I mean, it's incredible how we hold ourselves back and how we can limit ourselves. So we met that beautiful day in the beautiful English landscape in a workshop, in a seminar called Leading with Grace and Resilience, which has been initiated by our beautiful friend Karen Downs. And she was leading us with our other beautiful friend, Silla Elworthy. And me too, I've done the workshop 3 times with them. And what I love about it is really to see, you know, where can we bring all kinds of softer skills together with things which we also need, which is focus and discipline and a little bit more structure, which is what we all had to learn in this society. But do we also give space to our more feminine qualities? So for me, it has been a lifetime quest. And when I met those 2 women, I really found amazing fellow spirits on the path to explore the topic in a deeper sense. And so on the first day, the door opened and you came in, and you were the first person. I was the first person you saw, and I was just thinking, that's it, right on.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
Finally, I met you. Yeah. And I can really recall that moment because it was such a joy just seeing you in the kitchen. And here she is. I was really like, and yeah, if you sharing it, I realized at the moment how important it is to listen really this tiny voice inside of us, because as I decided to go to this workshop, to this retreat of our beloved friend Karen, and after I saw Silla in Berlin, and I remember exactly that moment where I was on that evening gathering, and Silla started talking and I started crying, and I thought, wow, what is it that is so deeply touched in myself? And this was actually the moment where I thought, I need to know more, and I just want to be more in contact with this woman. That's why I really immediately booked that workshop. And out of this is flourished a lot of beautiful things for all of us. And and as well, it flourished FemQ in Los Angeles and London, what you founded. And maybe I would really like to that you talk about this, because this is actually your story, which is really inspiring me. How you came to this conclusion or to this intuition, which called you to found FemQ.
So I think I want to start a little bit with my life, because I think it's our life stories are just so important, and we obviously become at one point what our life has prepared us for. And so I was raised by a very strong mother and a very strong grandmother. So already in my home, you know, the feminine was very present. And I was then partly raised in a Catholic boarding school, only for girls. And then I really always felt that urge to like leave my country and go out there and seek adventures. That's what obviously we have in common, you and I.
Totally.
And so at the age of 19, I went to Paris and just to study the language and to come back after a year. And I didn't come back. I stayed there for 14 years in my first day in Paris. And after my studies, I really, like, I have to say, accidentally, started a job in a model agency as a sort of just helping over the summer because I spoke the languages. And then they started to send me around as a model scout. And then I began a career in the late 80s, 90s in the whole sort of very, very exciting fashion industry in Paris. And I obviously had like a very, very strong confrontation with the feminine in an industry which is very feminine, with all kinds of cultures. And it was to be with so many cultures for so many years. I mean, every day I was exposed maybe to 20, 30, 40 different cultures because all the girls came from different countries. So and all come at a same age with the same task, you know, like they leave their country, they come to Paris. What are they going to do? How are they going to behave? And there are certain patterns I could see already then.
Okay.
And I was very fascinated how, you know, girls from Sweden are different than girls from Latin America, and Italian girls are different from French girls. And so I got a proper sense how we are as women. And then it just became a lifelong exploration. I mean, to just see who we are as women, what is the feminine, and also to then I changed into the film industry. And the film industry, interesting enough, all the creative, in at least in the where I worked, all the creative parts were mostly men, and all the production parts were mostly women. And so again, it was really interesting to see that. But what made me then really go more fully into this whole topic was that, first of all, I started in my inner development to attend women's groups and to see how women heal together and how women can support each other. But I also I later moved away from Paris and then moved back to Paris. And when I moved from Paris to Berlin, I saw a really, really very big difference between femininity in the French capital and femininity in the German capital. And so once I landed in Berlin, I really wanted to do something around the topic of femininity. And it wasn't that clear when I had the idea, but then a friend introduced Silla Alworthy to me, who was then already very much into the exploration. She wrote a book about femininity, and she had an organization where it was all about how to bring the feminine qualities into the world. And so this is when I really felt there is a need to have this conversation. And the conversation for me was just really not, it was around the whole topic. What does it mean to be feminine? What does it mean? What are the feminine qualities? Are we feminists? What does it mean to be a feminist today? And it's a big topic, and I think it's a little bit of a mud puddle. And many people get very upset with the conversation. And now, 4 years later, I'm thinking, wow, I became an expert in a domain where I'm thinking it's important, and it's an important conversation. So I then, with our also beautiful common friend, Kirsten, who invented the name FemQ, so femme, because she, she honored my French sort of background, and Q from IQ, and EQ from just what is the feminine, what is the intelligence or the wisdom of the feminine. And the more I went and dived into the topic, the more I felt the urgency to really say something about it. And then Karen and Silla came along and they did some, and that was my missing link, which is once we know what the feminine is, who do we want to be in the world? What is our vision, our mission? What is our stand? And what do we want to bring into the world? And so we founded FAMQ, the four of us, and started with a summit in Berlin. And I was blown away how deep this work was from the beginning. How interesting the conversations, and then we just wanted to bring it to other countries and see, what would be the conversation there.
Yeah.
And so you came to London and you came to Los Angeles, and of course London had, as you know, nothing to do with Los Angeles. Each country, it's a completely different conversation. And why, like I got also, sometimes people say to us, yeah, but I mean, isn't that like an old school conversation now, the feminine, are we not like beyond all that? And I'm thinking, that statement can only come from privileged white people. I mean, it's a statement. We're living in a patriarchal system. We are led by mostly men. Too many women, millions and millions of women every day abused and raped and suppressed and can't go to school. I mean, as long as we don't honor women, we don't honor the feminine. And as long as we don't honor the feminine, we don't honor women. So no, I think it's a really important conversation. And I feel very responsible, and I think we should all feel responsible to have that conversation, because if we don't explore what it is we bring, then we will not change anything in a patriarchal system. So
it's true. But how would you summarize actually those feminine qualities? If, sometimes what I experienced is, if I'm telling people about FemQ, I totally get immediately that point where they say, oh, are you a feminist? And then the energy shifts. And then, so it's a little bit like pushing it away. But if we just allow ourselves to have that feminine quality, which is not only in women, which is also in men or in all of us. If we allow ourselves to explore it and to live it, this would be amazing. How would you describe the feminine qualities you discovered over the last 4 years?
You know what? I really so agree with you, because I also, I learned a lot by having these conversations, because of course we can, for example, not say, oh, compassion is a feminine quality, and then then immediately you get the feedback, yeah, but men can also be compassionate. Well, that's not the conversation. And that's, I think, why the conversation is so difficult, because the conversation is a gender conversation, but the conversation is also not a gender conversation. So I think the most important project on this level I have done in my whole life is what I'm doing at the moment. And is I have studied this book, which is called The Dream of the Cosmos, and it will be online very soon, so don't hang in there. And why I love the book so much is that Anne Baring is an academic, and she dedicated 40 years of her life to find out what happened actually to the feminine. And so what most people probably don't know is that we had for 25,000 years an image of the cosmos and nature as being the great mother. And so everything was imbued with the divine feminine and with the feminine. And so the feminine was everything which was mysterious and spiritual and the unseen. The soul was feminine, and women were like our guardians of the spirituality, of the earth, of Mother Earth, and they had their rituals and all of that. And then we, like, it's very, very well explained in that book because, and that's why it's so interesting to live in these times, because of a very strong climate change, then countries would expand into other countries, and then the whole concept of war began. And then man would go into war, and then man would take over other countries, and then this whole sort of another era. We went from the lunar era into the solar era, and then a whole new era began for humanity, in which the feminine did not find its right place. And if you think where we're standing today in the time of climate change and all of that, do we need to bring back this acceptance and the worship and the appreciation of the feminine? I think so.
Totally.
And
so that's why I was just wondering in my mind, or it just came to me, and I thought, is this book also speaking about that time we are entering now, or?
Yeah, totally. It's totally speaking why all of a sudden, look, 2 years ago, I was at Christmas in Austria with my family, and we were sitting in church, and there were all these little girls sitting in front of me. They were all so beautiful and so like full of passion, and it was just a beautiful moment. And then we listened to the Christmas mass, you know, and
the Christmas mass is actually nice.
I know it's mass, is it? It's the messy Christmas. Anyway, totally. And then the whole speech was for 30 minutes about God and him and Jesus and him and his will. And I was thinking, yeah, you know, we've lost a lot in this whole sort of, she talks a lot about, you know, how the religions are all obviously focused, you know, on him and on Allah and God and him. And so where do we find our place in there? So, I mean, you know, what is so interesting about your question, and I was thinking about that before we spoke today, is in a society where the qualities which are actually allocated to the feminine are not really worshipped. Originally, the qualities would be nurturing, you know, all the qualities of the mother, the compassion, the nurturing, the heart-centeredness, the embodiment, following your intuition, you know, being emotional, surrendering, you know, and like the whole domain of feelings. But as we know from our corporate career, you and I, were you ever sitting in a meeting where people say, okay, Constanze, tell us about your emotional situation today. How does it feel? No.
Yeah, no, there was no space actually for it. And the other quality, what I see is as well creativity and dedication to beauty. Yeah. So this is really what, from my perspective, FemQ is totally different from other summits, or it's so, and there comes this beauty in it and this creativity and that space holding where you feel safe, nurtured. And I think this is what we need to really open up and to feel safe to express our emotions. And and this is what I actually missed in my career, and where I thought for really a long time, maybe I'm wrong, I'm missing this. And I thought, no one else is actually questioning it. Maybe I'm wrong, question and looking for it. So, but now I know, okay, it is in so many women, and not only men in women, because also men have the desire, I would actually say it, to be in a beautiful space, in a beautiful environment where we all can open up and show our emotion, our vulnerability.
Yeah, I think to your point, you know, being unashamed, I think that's where I felt really that something is wrong, you know, that when you bring up these things which are important, you know, it's important that we talk about our feelings, and it's important that we know our inner landscape. Another thing of the feminine, I mean, traditionally, and is the whole mystical side, you know, and the going in and exploring your inner world. And I think this is what I find most surprising about society in general, is how many people go on to big adventures, you know, and explore all kinds of things and learn new languages and play instruments and computer programs. But for me, it has always been the biggest adventure to go in and to see, you know, why do I have limitations? Where are my shadows? Where do I lie to myself? Where am I not connected? And I think that is something we have more naturally. Now it's getting a little bit muddy as well with the gender and the feminine, but I mean, it's true that we start very early. Girls start very early to explore the inner world together. And I can totally get it that for 25,000 years, this was our domain, because it's so natural. It's just something we do naturally.
Yeah. And the other important point on that is, for me, as women, we were allowed to discover those emotions. And I think mainly men haven't. So, because if they started crying, then they got the thing, boys don't cry. So how to connect to your emotions if you are not allowed to just really feel what hurts you? And I think this is something which needs to change. The other day I had such a really lovely moment with my little nephew. We went to the playground, and so he came to me and then he said, oh no, my sister actually told me this little girl just hit him. And I went to him and said, you shouldn't hit girls. And then in the minute I said this to him, he replied to me and he said, but why should girls hit little boys? And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And he was so true. I mean, just listen from an outside perspective to myself. Why am I telling him this? Because both are humans and shouldn't be, why should each of us get hurt? But it was interesting. It was a really interesting moment for me to see how, in a way, we are conditioned on that point.
Totally. And I think it's the most interesting aspect I find about the current crisis, you know, the COVID crisis, because as we saw everywhere, and especially also in England, it highlighted where society is really not functioning, and it highlighted where we need other qualities. And, you know, when people are getting sick and nobody's taking care of them, or when the health systems are breaking down, and when like people die alone on hospital corridors, you know, because there's not enough staff. I mean, there was something like they were asking for volunteers to help here in England. And they had something like 340,000 people coming forward who were all retired or like would just wanted to help. And this is really amazing. And it also highlighted that we don't pay these people, you know, who are key people in our, And so I think it is just an interesting time to look through the lens of FAMQ. You know, what are we doing with people who are simply caring of the elders? You know, what are we doing with people who are taking care of our children? Are they honored? Are they paid enough, you know, and are they our heroines and heroes in our society, you know? And they should be. The caring aspect of the feminine.
And actually the caring through the generation is also an important part for me. What I realized while we're going through this Corona thing is that what I really appreciate about it is that kids are at home and somehow back in our society. Yesterday I had a call, and then there was this, it was a big call of 20 people, and then this little boy came in, and you know, before I never really saw it. We just pushed them out, just brought them to the kindergarten, and at the moment I can see that super challenging to have them at home. But on the other hand, there's some part of me which is I'm happy to reintegrate the old and the new, the young and the old back in our life, because the stress and running even faster didn't really make space for this.
And you know, that is what you are very much standing for me in my life, and where you have been an ongoing inspiration is I find the way you do connect with yourself and your inner wild woman and your unashamed self and your natural self and your intuitive self and your shaman self and your incredibly feminine self, is that you it's such it's something you actively exercise, and you do, because you know, I mean, we obviously had a time where we were living together, which was fantastic. And I was every day reminded that how it is to live in the flow, how it is to be like connected to what your needs are and what is actually going on at that very moment. And you're such a teacher on that level, because you are very you have the facility to do so, but you also have taken the decision to do so every day. And in that you are a big inspiration, and in that I'm so supporting your work, because I think your work in the world is so incredibly important, because I could see how important it was for me, and doing sessions with you and doing your constellation work. And so we just have, you open a really beautiful space, which is completely non-judgmental, and in which you are so present with your very grounded femininity. And in that, things are happening, and things that came up inside of myself, which would have probably not come up in another context, just because I would have been ashamed or not feeling safe or not, or feeling judged, mostly feeling judged. That's what I loved about this explanation here, is it's all about what other people are thinking, you know?
Yeah. I think the expectation of the judgment is really the thing which is holding us so terribly back. And
But to your point also, Constanze, is that was the most the biggest exploration I had with that word was, and you know, somebody who had a quite traumatic childhood, you know, with a very violent stepfather and a mother who was dealing with addictions, and so I can also see that there was shame and there was trauma, and but what I had to do to heal myself is to really to build up a connection and a relationship with myself, because if we are unashamed and it's not authentic and it doesn't come from an authentic place, then we could just, you know, like shop for more shame, and that would be a terrible sort of so that is where your work is important, you know, that and my work is also important, of course, because what I'm doing is I'm doing profiling and personal branding because I want women to go out into this world, and men, by the way, and just own who they are, really understand what their vision is, what their passion is, what they're burning for, what they would like go to war for if they needed to, you know, like what is it really what drives us. But it's a big exploration.
It totally is. So one part is really what drives us, and then but the other part is from my perspective as well, the other person who is just mirroring your greatness as you did it to me. So and I think in this, if we have someone who is mirroring us, sometimes we can't see it. And so for this is also super important what you are doing, because you're helping activists to show their brightest light in their homepage, in their in their Ausdruck, I don't know,
expression. in the
in
word.
their
Totally.
in their expression. And yeah, and really standing tall into the in this, standing tall in who we are, and sometimes we can't see it. People just mirroring it back to me, but I also have moments where I'm not really standing in it, and that's why I'm really liking that word unashamedly, because it has this sassiness I have on some days, but also the shame which is in me too. Even I did so many coachings, or I did so many self-development. On some days, it really hits me as well. And yeah, so this leads me to my other question. What is, where did you discover it being unashamed in your life? So what was, maybe you just have a moment which jumps into your mind, which you would like to share on the shame part, or even on the other parts, that we just get this two dimension on it.
I thought about it, of course, you know, before we had this conversation.
Really?
Because yeah, I thought about it. And what I find so interesting is, you know, actually I was always unashamed when I had the courage to really go for what I thought was important in that moment. So, you know, sometimes I'm wondering, you know, whether it's unashamed or whether it's just courageous, and what is it actually, you know? And so for me, unashamed, I think, means that, to come back to this explanation I read out earlier, step one would be to connect with my intuition and inner guidance. And I think we all have a lot of inner guidance. And then, you know, think about it, and, you know, like, stay with it for a moment. See whether it's really so important that I'm going to go on a heroine's journey with it. And then just fucking go for it. And so I did that a lot of times in my life. You know, I was unashamed when I said to my parents that I'm not going to come back from Paris, and I just had to stay. And then I was very unashamed when I said that I'm not going to be a manager after my studies, but I'm going to be a model scout. So I had to really do that, what she says here, you know. I had to be unashamed and just honest about things that other people might find shocking. So another big aspect was how we were as women in relationship to men, how we lived our sexuality, how, of course, I was very much educated and influenced by my sisters in France, the Parisian tribe, and how they were seriously unashamed in certain areas.
In certain areas, yeah.
Well, just, you know what I loved about it was there was a certain, I think there's one word which is hovering over Paris, which is seduction. So everything is seducing. It's seducing through perfume, beauty, fashion, food, wine. And so obviously it's a little bit more sensual. And in that sensuality, there is more sort of, let's just do it. Let's just celebrate life, and let's just be in in our creativity and in our craziness, and living life a little bit more fully. And
in the moment.
And in the, and in that I thought, there was a certain playfulness, I would call it like that, you know, in the interaction between women and men, to just be flirtatious and seductive, and it was fun. And in that, and of course, I mean, it was the time, you know, of clubbing and dancing, and it was very inspiring. And I felt very liberated, really. I think it's a big liberation to be unashamed.
Yeah, there is really a big liberation in it. I can see it and I can feel it as well. On, on the other hand, sometimes that fear of this liberation also brings that fear. For me, the biggest fear always is, or what I can see is that that's the fear of leaving the community or getting
Yeah,
judged in your community, and then the fear of being kicked out because who
yeah.
you are. I think this is the most point of yeah, the biggest point for me. So and yeah, standing for my own is the fear which is holding, actually is holding me back. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it is, I think that is why I find it today, you know, in my more mature self, I understood that when I was younger, I would often get myself like, you know, I would be like on fire about something I passionately believed in.
Mhm.
And then I would often run too fast
Yeah.
and then feel overwhelmed by my own courage and then be
The
completely
other point of it,
overwhelmed. Sorry?
that's the other point in it. So
Yeah.
feeling overwhelmed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then sometimes I had to roll back because then I was afraid. And so now I find it really important to take my time. And
Yeah.
to the point of where what we live at the moment, I think the biggest gift of this whole sort of lockdown, and I'm in week 9 now here in England, was
Mhm.
to really understand how different I function when I have enough time to reflect, to stay at home,
Absolutely.
to be
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
myself,
Mhm.
to shut up, just be
Yeah.
quiet. And
Totally.
you know, because then my inside of myself, I had more moments where I could really connect with what is important and not important, read the books, journal,
Mhm.
do my
Mhm.
rituals, open a sacred space and be much more in that kind of beautiful, quiet space. And
Absolutely.
and then I would not make so many mistakes, because the mistakes I made, which I afterwards would regret, would
Mhm.
always be when I'm too fast and too fierce and too like
Overwhelmed is
galloping.
the other. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The other thing is also I make a lot of mistakes if I'm stressed. If
Yeah,
I'm running too fast, then
yeah.
it happened that I lose my keys. Um,
Do you, Constanze?
really. And this other tiny little things,
Other things, your bike, your wallet.
my wallet. But the lucky thing about it is always coming back.
Yeah.
The other day I lost my key in the we share car,
Oh,
and I
you
know
did.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. I remember it quite well that it was in this car. So for 3 weeks I didn't have a key. Luckily I had this the second one, but it was just one. Yeah, and then after 3 weeks I called the Fundbüro, the found office, founding office,
The
and they
Office for
really had
Lost
my
and
key.
Found. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. They really had my key. I couldn't really believe it. I mean, I'm somehow I know it that it's always coming back. Yeah, but it was really funny. Yeah.
So I think there's one more thing I want to say to this whole topic, to be being unashamed and being connected to yourself. I
Mhm.
think what we both have also experienced in the last 3 years was a certain homecoming into what we want to bring into the world, you know, because we've both been in the corporate sector for a long time,
That's true.
and we both decided to step out of it. It was a big deal. And
Okay, and it was unashamed because
yeah,
we were so brought up that it's not really how can you how can you just leave
yeah,
that job? I mean, this is
yeah,
just a dream job. How can you do it? I mean, yeah. So I got a lot of question of this. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's another something important I see with all the women and also men I'm working with at the moment is, you know, where came a point in their life where they simply had to step out of a container which was too tight,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
limited them too much, and what courage they needed to really overcome the fear and the criticism and the anxiety about will it work out financially? Will I get enough support? You know, was that the right decision? And you know, how can we make this work? And so for me, it was really like I went through a dark night of the soul. I went through all kinds of doubts and questioned myself. And I have to say, I have, in terms of what I do on a professional level, never been happier in my life. And I actually brought everything I've learned in my corporate career now into what I'm doing with people, you know, the service I'm offering to people like yourself, to everybody who wants to make a change in the world, and everybody who is out there who needs support of, you know, can I really trust myself? Is my work important? You know, what are the aspects of my work? What are my qualities which I bring forward, which are needed to fully blossom into whoever I want to be? And so I think once you do this, and once you are not in that small container anymore and have to lie to yourself and have to drink a lot and be very fast and like distract yourself the whole time, because the truth is somehow unbearable. And so once you step out of that, I think, you know, you're more connected to yourself, and then it's easier to be unashamed, because I totally own today who I am. You totally own who you are. But I mean, honestly, that was a very long journey.
It was, yeah.
And it is, not
it
was,
still
is.
I mean, it still is, yeah. And yeah, I think, I mean, on the other hand, I think if it wouldn't be like this, we couldn't just enjoy the
unfolding,
the blossoming, the flourishing, because then it is just getting out of it, and then really feeling how you were contracted and how you relax while you're unfolding. So
look, I want to show you a really good example today of unfolding.
Show me, please.
That's unfolding, right?
And then even this here is unfolding in the most beautiful way. That's why I really like flowers, and because I also like the flourish, how they're blossoming to really open up, and then safely in a way, how in the slowness as it needs.
Aloneness, totally.
Wow, thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me.
It was a pleasure, because we both talked about what we love most. I want to say one more thing. I have four books who are here, which are lying on my table here. I ask for support of 4 women who have been so deeply exploring the divine feminine in terms of being authors, and which is our beloved friend Scilla Elworthy with her new book, The Mighty Heart, which I love that title, just because it's and it's on how to transform conflict. So she has been a big inspiration in both our lives.
Our lives, that's true.
The other woman is Susan Anderson, who is also part of the FAMQ team, and who explored very much in an academic way the divine feminine and how we bring this into the world, and what, you know, a very, very deep academic work. And then I found this book, which is my new favorite book about the feminine.
Psychedelics, really? Oh my goodness, this sounds really good.
Yeah, why? Because all our sisters for the other 25,000 years were very much also exploring, you know, the roots in the forest and the mushrooms and all these. And Maria Papaspiro, who is this woman of this book, she said something, she described the feminine as follows, which I think is so, I would love to finish our conversation with that.
Absolutely.
Feminine is like a crystal with many surfaces, which invites more depth and perspectives, the more we examine it in different lights. So the feminine is like a crystal with many surfaces, and the more you examine it, the more depth and perspectives in different lights it invites you to explore. And I think it's a very good point. It's a very good point, because the feminine is mysterious, and yeah, and the more you explore it,
we all are so different, or we do have so many different facets, and there's so much explore in ourselves. Thanks, this is really a nice quote at the end.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Constanze.
Thank you so much.
And much love to all our sisters out there and our brothers. And yeah, let's be unashamed, and let's be feminine. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you. And it's a pleasure or a great joy to have you in my life. Thank you very much.
Same for me. Same for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Right. Bye-bye.